The case banged against the floor, sharp enough to notice. She came out from between two closed shops, hood down, arms locked on a beat-up box like it might split open. The latch swung loose, handle dangling. Rain dripped off her sleeve when she pulled the door shut. She hesitated under the awning, eyes darting quick, then slower. Nobody followed, but she checked anyway. I popped the lock. She slipped inside without a word, damp wool and rain filling the cab. Her hood stayed up. I caught a line of dark hair stuck to her cheek. "Where to?" I asked. My voice felt too loud. Her eyes flicked to the plexiglass, then dropped to the case. "Just drive." That wasn't unusual, but the weight behind it was. "Any direction in mind?" She shook her head. "I'll tell you when to turn." The meter clicked on. I pulled off the curb, tires sliding quiet on the wet asphalt. The city felt slowed down, sirens far, steam curling from the grates. She didn't move, hands tight on the case. At every turn it knocked the floor, hollow, like a reminder. 10 blocks in, she finally spoke. "Left here." Her voice was quiet but sure. The street narrowed, row houses pressing close. A faint salsa beat leaked from somewhere and cut off as we passed. At the next light, straight. Her hands never left the case. Pale fingers clutched the scuffed leather, knuckles taut. I caught her reflection in the mirror, hood shadowing her face, eyes fixed outward but not seeing storefronts or street signs, just something further off. By the river the rain turned to mist, caught in the lamps. She drew a line on the window with her finger, then rubbed it out quick. Right at the light. We passed a flickering diner sign, grease smell hanging in the wet air. She glanced at it with something like hunger, but said nothing. The case shifted with her movement, clunking too lightly, too hollow. She grabbed it fast, held it close again. Rain picked up, wipers dragging slow across the glass. Steam rose off the grates, hazy around the lamps. A freight horn sounded somewhere in Queens, stretched and low. She broke the silence again. "Left." Then, a few blocks later, straight. Her voice stayed steady, like she was following a map only she could see. The case thumped at every turn, hollow, like it had its own rhythm. She touched it constantly, palms smoothing the battered leather, fingers tapping along the edge, like she was checking for cracks invisible to me. I asked if she played. She didn't look up. Not anymore. 2 words, clipped. A door closing. We rolled through a block of dark windows, storefront gates locked down. A cat streaked across the road, tail high, and vanished into a basement stairwell. She didn't react. Her directions got shorter now, right. Straight. Left again. Firing like notes in a piece I didn't know. She leaned closer to the glass once, pointed at a storefront plastered with faded for lease signs. "That used to be a record shop. You from here?" I asked. Her grip on the case tightened. No answer. The turn started to feel less like she was going somewhere and more like we were looping. At one red light a man stood under a busted lamp with a newspaper over his head. She stared until the light flipped, then pulled back in her seat. "You hungry?" I asked, nodding toward a pizzeria glowing ahead. "No." The word carried enough finality to clip the air. Rain came down harder, beating on the roof. Wipers couldn't keep up. The cab filled with the smell of wet asphalt. At an intersection, the crosswalk paint was almost gone, lamp flickering, puddles flashing under it. Her fingers lingered on the latch then, not opening, just checking. She caught me watching in the mirror. "It's not what you think." I haven't said what I think. Her mouth curved, more smirk than smile. "Good." The case slid forward at the next bump, latch snapping loose for a second. I saw inside. No violin, just frayed lining, empty. She clicked it shut again, calm, deliberate. "You were expecting strings," she said. Something like that. Disappointed. Different. That ended it. She turned back to the window, case balanced like a secret. We went under the L, rain dripping from the steel. The sound changed, hollow bumps louder. The case rattled with each jolt, cutting through the quiet. "Right," she said as we slipped back into open air. Her voice was softer now, like that glimpse of emptiness had cost her something. The street was narrower here. Sidewalks cracked, storefronts boarded. A bodega glowed on the corner, the smell of fresh coffee drifting into the damp. She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch it, then faced forward. "You know," I said, "most folks don't carry an empty case unless there's a reason." "There's always a reason." Her voice was flat, but something ran under it. She gave me another turn, then another. We ended up in front of a row of old brick, windows boarded, street lamp buzzing like a bad throat. She leaned forward, not toward me, past me, down the block. "That's where my father used to play," she said. "Not a club, just a room. Folding chairs." Her hood slipped back an inch, showing the angle of her jaw. Her mouth tightened on "used to." I glanced at her. She pulled the hood forward again. "Left," she added. Rain slowed. We passed a small park behind rusted chain link. Swings creaked in the wind. She tapped the lid of the case with her fingers, restless. Her foot moved under the seat, heel tapping once, then stopping. "You play too?" I asked. "I did. A long time ago." Nothing more. On a brick wall, the headlights caught a faded violin mural. She stared until it passed. That's when I understood. She wasn't mapping streets, but places she remembered. We hit a red light. The cab settled, and the case tapped the floor again, soft but insistent. She pressed her palm flat on the lid. "You're thinking it's strange," she said. "I've seen stranger." She gave a small nod. The signal stayed red. A bus sighed beside us, doors hissing open to nobody. Steam drifted around its wheels. "My father used to play on nights like this," she said, voice low. Said rain tuned the city down a half step. She went quiet, but I could feel the memory playing under her words. The light flipped green, and I eased forward. She didn't give me a direction right away, so I let the cab drift, tires whispering on wet pavement. A siren wailed 2 blocks over, stretched thin, then faded. "He wasn't famous," she said suddenly, still staring through the glass. "Just steady. Weddings. Church basements. A hall on Lafayette that smelled like polish and winter coats." "Brooklyn?" I asked. She nodded. Her fingers tapped the latch. His case had a broken hinge, a sticker from a bus line that doesn't exist anymore. He made me carry it sometimes. Said if I learned to hold it right, I'd learn to play right. I pictured her smaller, trailing him through rain, lugging something heavier than she was. She shifted the case now, and it gave another hollow thud, echoing the thought. "You want to know why this one's empty?" she said, not asking. "If you want to tell it." He pawned the violin once. Rent was due. Got it back a month later, swore the sound had changed. Pretended not to mind. I minded. A pothole rattled the cab. In a deli window, a cat sat behind fogged glass, eyes half shut, ruler of nothing and everything. Years later, he got sick, she said. His hands remembered the shapes. Brain didn't. He'd hold the bow, just hover. Once he asked me where his case was. Meant the old one, hinge and sticker. I showed him this. He said, "That's not it." She tapped the lid softly. We slipped under the BQE, rain dripping off steel. Every bump sounded louder. The case knocked along. "So I started carrying this," she said. "After he passed?" I asked. She shook her head. "After he forgot me for good. The violin went to a cousin. Plays weddings now. Good for her." Her hand rested flat on the case. I kept the echo. The word stuck. Echo. Something gone, but still there. We came out from under the highway. The city widened, river black and slick beyond warehouses. A tug shoved a barge, horn low, spreading across the night. "Right?" she said, soft but clear. "Then straight till you see the mural." Rain dropped back to mist, hanging in the lamps. She set her chin on the case. holding it looser. I adjusted the mirror, though it didn't need it. Just habit. Empty makes it easier, she said. Easy to carry on nights like this. And the other? I asked. It keeps a seat open, she murmured. If I put something in it, it stops being what it is. We passed a cyclist in a yellow poncho, tires slicing water into braids that vanished quick. Her eyes followed, but her hand stayed steady on the case. The mural came up, a violin across brick, paint faded but still there. Rain made the strings shine. That one, she said. I pulled to the curb. The meter ticked, small and domestic. She didn't move, just looked. The case touched the floor with a muted tap, as if agreeing. After this, there's one more place. Where? You'll hear it before you see it. The wipers clicked once, then rested. And sure enough, a thin note slipped through the night. Not a melody, just a test, sliding up, then down. Hear that? She asked. I killed the fan. Rain filled the silence. The tone hung there, fragile as wire. Left, she said. Slow. We followed the sound past garages and rusted doors. A single bulb burned over a side entrance. The case slid forward on the turn, knocked once, hollow. She didn't catch it this time. It's close, she whispered. Another note threaded out, steadier now. We turned toward a church with a dark tower and a basement window fogged with moisture. That's where it was coming from. Low scales, a second voice joining, rough but trying. I eased the cab to the curb. Want me to wait? Yeah. Engine off. I cut it. The city came in. Rain, a bus far off, a door shutting. Underneath, the basement music started, stopped, then started again. She laid her hand on the case latch, just feeling it. He used to say the basement made everyone better. No one listening but the floor. We sat through a broken scale that finally climbed clean. She let out a sound, not laugh, not cry, just breath moving around memory. Straight after this, she said softly. 2 more turns. We rolled on. The church fell behind in the mirror, basement window dulling to nothing. She guided me into a narrow street where the air changed. Bleach, floor wax, a ghost of burnt coffee. Community center? I asked. Used to be, she said. The building looked plain and tired, brick painted in a color that had no name left. A faded stencil read South Side Arts. One basement window glowed weak, like it was holding out. Here, she said. I pulled up beside a hydrant. Rain ticked on the hood. A drop slid slowed down the side window, caught in the corner. She didn't reach for the door. The case shifted against her legs, gave its hollow knock. You going in? I asked. She shook her head. No, just needed to know it still sounds. For a moment we sat quiet. Rain ticked on the hood. I shifted in my seat, hand brushing the mirror though it didn't need fixing. She closed her eyes, like she was listening for herself. After this, she said, one more. The far one. Far like Queens. Far like the end of the line. I merged us onto the belt. The city thinned. Warehouses dropped away, river smell turning briny. Expansion joints clunked under the tires, the case knocking along. Marine Parkway Bridge rose ahead, ribs in the dark. We climbed slow, the base spread below like hammered metal. No lights on it but ours. Cables dripped. The case tapped again when steel met asphalt. End of the line, she murmured. Rockaway crept in. Low houses, shuttered storefronts, a few bars glowing stubborn. Street signs wet and green, boardwalk posts showing like ribs. Ocean breath carried toward us, steady and unbothered. Here, she said. I pulled under a no-standing sign no one would read at this hour. The meter ticked. The sea smell came in through a leak in the door seal. Salt and old wood, clean in a way the city never was. You want me to wait? I asked. She nodded. Just a minute. She opened the door. The wind reached in, cool fingers brushing the cab. She stepped out with the case, walked to the boardwalk steps, and set it down. The latch clicked. The lid opened. empty lining caught the mist. She looked at it like it was another seat. Then she sat one step up, halfway, like she wasn't staying, just needed to pause. The ocean was loud. The case shook in the wind. She held it still. My father used to say stuff like that. Once told me the room was too small unless you opened a door. Bigger sound, he called it. I stayed put, engine idling low, metal ticking as it cooled. The salt air cut clean through the usual city mix. No garbage, no grease, just brine and rust. She sat with the case open, letting the ocean fill it. Time just dragged. After a while, she closed it, soft, careful. The latch clicked like a whisper. She stood, lifted the handle steady, and came back. The hood shadowed her face again. She slid into the back seat, palm resting on the lid as if keeping it calm. All set? I asked. Yeah. She exhaled. Anywhere with a train. I pulled away from the curb, tires whispering over wet blacktop. The boardwalk post slid away behind us. The road straightened. The case went quiet. We didn't talk. Between low houses, I caught a glimpse of the bay, still quiet. The bridge rose ahead, cables dripping, red tower light blinking slow. She kept her eyes forward, the case steady against her knees. At a light near a shuttered pharmacy, she leaned forward, slid a folded bill through the slot. It was damp, softened by the rain. Thank you, she said, for driving slow. Some nights only have one speed. That pulled a faint laugh out of her, half breath, half sound, gone quick but real. The light turned green. I rolled us on. She stepped out at a small station, lamps buzzing, puddles shining back. She paused at the door. You keep the sound of it? I asked, without thinking. That's all I keep, I guess. She walked toward the stairs, not rushing, not looking back. Hoodie, case, footsteps fading. Then nothing. I turned the cab around. The city filled back in, lights and noise. The seat was empty. I still heard the knock. And then another night stirred. Burnt coffee, wet scrubs, a man who swore 5 minutes could hold him together. That story can wait. For now, I let the wipers drag their slow beat and drove deeper into the dark. If you're still out here with me, hit subscribe and we'll keep going into the next night.